On April 28, 1988, Aloha Airlines Flight 243 took off from Hilo International Airport in Hawaii on its way to Honolulu. This plane had to cover this distance in less than 1 hour. Everything was going just fine, and the weather was perfectly clear for this flight that day. The plane took off normally from the airport without any problems. But a few hours after takeoff, a sudden explosion rocked the entire plane. Before anyone could understand anything, with a jolt, the roof of the first-class cabin was unrooted and separated from the plane. Passengers and cabin crew were horrified to see the open sky above their heads. Did the pressure of the air pull all the passengers out of the plane? Did the plane break into pieces mid-air? Was this plane able to make an emergency landing? Stay tuned to know more about this horrible accident in the aviation world. This Boeing 737-200 series aircraft was given to Aloha Airlines in 1969. Till now, this aircraft had completed a total of 35,496 hours of air travel. But in its service so far, this aircraft was mostly used for short-distance travel, due to which this aircraft had taken off and landed more than 90,000 times. Due to its many short-distance flights, this aircraft had taken off and landed 3 times more than its prescribed limit. The plane had already made 3 trips from Honolulu to Hilo on the day of the accident. For its 4th flight that day, Flight 243, there were 89 passengers and 6 crew members on board. Everything was operating normally at the airport, and the ground safety staff completed the external inspection of the aircraft. In its report, the safety staff did not mention any technical or body part defects in the airplane. Some time ago, this plane passed the Boeing service bulletin report as per its scheduled check. The flight was led by 44-year-old Captain Robert Sconce-Timer, who had over 8,500 flight hours of skilled flying experience. 36-year-old First Officer Madeline Tompkins was appointed as co-pilot for this flight, who had over 3,500 hours of flying experience in this type of Boeing 737 plane. In total, both the pilots had more than 10,000 hours of flying experience in this type of Boeing 737 plane. Flight attendant Clarabelle Lansing was also aboard the flight along with other crew members. Slowly, all the passengers started boarding the plane. Meanwhile, while passing through the boarding bridge, a passenger sees a crack in the outer fuselage of the plane and gets a little nervous. But thinking that maybe the airport staff would already know about it, she doesn't mention it to any flight crew or airport staff. After all the passengers completed boarding, the flight started its roll-off process at around 1 p.m. Flight 243 took off from Hilo International Airport at approximately 1:25 p.m. The flight route: the pilot initiates the climb to take the plane to its assigned altitude. As usual, with every flight, it is mandatory for passengers to wear seat belts after takeoff until the plane reaches its designated height. That's why all the passengers of Flight 243 were also wearing their seat belts. Slowly increasing its height, as soon as the plane reaches a height of 24,000 feet, suddenly there is a loud explosion in the plane. The entire roof of the first-class cabin is unrooted and separated from the plane. After this sudden explosion, trying to control the plane, when the pilots look back, they are shocked. A cockpit door and the roof of the first-class cabin were ripped apart, and the pilot could see the open sky behind him. With a strong wind, pieces of the plane were flying here and there all over the cockpit. Death in front of their eyes, the passengers of the first-class cabin were swinging on their seats with the help of seat belts. With a speed of 300 miles per hour, the wind was trying to pull everything out of the plane. Due to the sudden decompression, a large portion of the left side of the plane was also broken and separated from the plane. Luckily, due to the seatbelt sign being on, All the passengers were wearing seat belts and remained glued to their seats. But the cabin crew were not so lucky. Air hostess Clarabelle Lansing was desperately trying not to be pulled out of the plane by holding on to the side panel. But unfortunately, the air pressure pulled Clarabelle Lansing out of the plane. Fighting for life and death, barely holding on to the passenger seat, air hostess Michelle was still advising the passengers to remain calm and hold on to their seats. Terrified in the cockpit, the pilots were trying to control the plane, but soon they realized that many controls of the plane had failed. The plane was slowly getting out of their control. At an altitude of 24,000 feet, due to the gusts of wind, the plane starts to stagger rapidly. Due to cabin decompression and the high speed of the plane, it had become difficult for the passengers to breathe normally. In the event of cabin decompression in the air, oxygen masks come out of the cabin ceiling to help passengers breathe. Now, the pilots took the decision to bring the plane down quickly without wasting any more time. The pilots start bringing the plane down quickly by lowering the nose of the plane. Pilots bring the plane down so fast that at one point the plane starts coming down at a speed of 4,100 feet per minute. Generally, passenger planes come down at a speed of 3,000 feet per minute so that the pilots can control the plane and the plane does not crash. But the pilot had no other option but to bring the plane down quickly to save themselves and all the passengers from falling to death. Despite repeated attempts, the landing gear light does not turn green. Usually in such situations, pilots can also check with the cockpit camera whether the landing gear is down or not. Anyway, in these circumstances, the pilot had no other option. The pilots only wanted to land the plane at any cost. But luckily, the landing gear was already down, and the green light was not coming on the control panel just because of a system fault. After about 13 minutes of that explosion in the air, the plane was waving in the air at high speed. Finally, it touches the runway. Along with the emergency services, none of the airport employees could believe their eyes as to how such a damaged plane could land safely. Out of 89 passengers aboard the plane, 65 passengers got hurt in this accident. Out of them, 8 passengers were seriously injured. Unfortunately, air hostess Clarabelle Lansing dies in this accident and her body was never found. The plane was badly damaged that there was no way to repair it. This incident was so horrifying and surprising that in the blink of an eye, its news spread all over the world and its investigation was started immediately. When the investigators investigate all the passengers, the same passengers who had seen the crack in the wall of the plane tell them about the crack in the outer fuselage. The place where the passenger tells about the crack, the investigators also suspected the crack at the same place. Due to the strong air pressure at such a height, the roof of the plane was unrooted and separated from this crack. However, this plane had spent 35,496 hours flying on such a sea route where the atmosphere was very moist and full of salt. Such weather is very dangerous for rusting any metal, but despite all this, Aloha Airlines did not consider it necessary to do regular and thorough checks of their planes. This horrific accident took place due to such huge human error during maintenance. If you found this story compelling, please like this video and subscribe our channel. Thank you.